Hello, welcome. Let's discuss the article regarding the Indo-Pacific in the Hindu newspaper editorial. What are the challenges involved in the Indo-Pacific region and what was the origin of the Indo-Pacific group nations and what is the relevance of the Indo-Pacific apart from the Trans-Pacific nations and what is the Quad and what are the strategic and military relations involved in this, what is the economic perspective of this in this regard, and how long the economic perspective relevant from today's world of the Indo-Pacific in countering the China. Let's discuss firstly what is the Indo-Pacific. Let's look at it. This is the region of the Indo-Pacific region. What are the parts involved in this are and the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Uh, Coming to the Indian Ocean, the whole part of the Indian Ocean except the polar regions and the temperate regions. Except this is the polar and the temperate regions of the Indian Ocean. Except this, the total region of the Indian Ocean is covered in the Indo-Pacific region. And coming here, the Pacific region, the same thing, the West Indian Ocean, the West Pacific Ocean and the Central Pacific Ocean, and these two parts are covered. East Pacific Ocean is completely excluded and polar region is completely excluded and parts aparting from the parts which are adjoining the US coastline, all these are American coastline are excluded. Let's say look at this map. This is the total Indo-Pacific region which covered is, this is the total Indo-Pacific. In this Pacific Ocean regarding the whole part of the polar region is excluded from the Indo-Pacific region and this coastline area of the American region is excluded. That's why what covered in the Indo-Pacific region here means only the West Pacific Ocean and the Central Pacific Ocean, whereas East Pacific Ocean is completely excluded. And coming to the joining part of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, that means the Indonesian islands, all these things, these three parts are covered in the Indo-Pacific region. Coming back into the article, what are the challenges involved in this Indo-Pacific Ocean in countering China? What will be the steps to follow by the India in the strategic talk in overriding economic realities? What will be the reality in this apart from the normal conventions or populism? Let's look at it. Recently, the third annual meeting of the 2+2 ministerial dialogue between the India and US are concluded, and it is the one of the amplified part of the this 2+2 dialogue amplified the ongoing conversation of India regarding in the Quad and the Indo-Pacific ideology. That means the 2+2 dialogue amplified this Quad and the Indo-Pacific, which are formed to against the threat from China. And in this regard, the US has a potential alliance partner. US evolved as the potential alliance partner in this Quad and the Indo-Pacific region. And coming into the deep into the article, no strategic vision has been captivated that much as influenced by the Indo-Pacific and the Quad in the India's foreign policy. That means Indo-Pacific గ్రూప్ క్వాడ్ గ్రూప్ రెండు ఫామ్ చేసినంత స్ట్రాటజిక్ గా ఏ పాలసీ కూడా ఇండియన్ ఫారిన్ పాలసీలో అంత ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ చేయాలి. దట్ మీన్స్ ద రిలవెన్స్ ఆఫ్ ద ఇండో పసిఫిక్ గ్రూప్ అండ్ ద క్వాడ్ గ్రూప్స్ అండ్ the international community once decided to quote New Delhi to play a decisive role in shape. ఎప్పుడైతే మిడ్ 2000s దట్ మీన్స్ 2005-2007 ఆ మధ్యలో ఇండియాని ఒక వరల్డ్ ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ చేసింది. ఇండియా అనేది ఒక వరల్డ్ ఎకనామిక్ పవర్ హౌస్ గా మారబోతుంది. అప్పటి ఉన్న ఎక్స్పెక్టేషన్స్ మళ్ళీ ఒక డికేడ్ తర్వాత స్ట్రాటజిక్ పరంగా రైజ్ అయ్యన్నమాట. స్ట్రాటజిక్ మిలిటరీ పరంగా ఇండో పసిఫిక్ రీజన్ లో ఇండియా అనేది ఒక డిసిసివ్ రోల్ ప్లే చేస్తూ దాని యొక్క షేప్ ని అంతరించుకునింది ఈ యొక్క రీజన్ లో అని చెప్పి చెప్తున్నాడు. రీజన్ స్ట్రాటజిక్ ఫ్యూచర్ అండ్ ద ఇండియాస్ రోల్ ఇన్ షేపింగ్ ఆఫ్ ద దిస్ డిసిసివ్ రోల్ ఇన్ ద రీజన్ అండ్ to lead charge against the China from the region, against the China in this region. And this can be fulfilled by will India and can India. And concepts, what are the concepts and what are the differences involved in this are, the Indo-Pacific is a grand, coming to the Indo-Pacific, it is a grand political and economic vision. పొలిటికో అండ్ ఎకనామిక్ విజన్ ఇండో పసిఫిక్ చూసుకున్నట్టయితే ఇది ఒక పొలిటికల్ ఎకనామిక్ విజన్ అన్నమాట. ఇండో పసిఫిక్ అనేది ఎక్కడి నుంచి ఆవిర్భవించిందంటే పొలిటికల్ అంటే వాట్ ఆర్ ద కంట్రీస్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఇన్ ఇట్, వాట్ ఆర్ ద ఐడియాలజీస్ ఆఫ్ ద కంట్రీస్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఇన్ దిస్ ఈస్ ద పొలిటికల్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్. కమింగ్ టు ద ఎకనామిక్ విజన్, what are the countries involved in this, what are the and what is the trade involved in this perspective, what are the FTAs, free trade agreements in the Indian Ocean region and the Asian countries, and all this regarding coming make up the economic vision of this Indo-Pacific. These forms the Indo-Pacific Forum. And coming to the Quad is a strategic and military consultation. Only one vision. The Quad involves only strategic and military consultations against China with a group of 4 countries that are the US, Australia, Japan and India. These are the 4 major countries formed a strategic and military forum of Quad. Depending on how one wants to see this as a group, Quad or Indo-Pacific, it will appear as their vision. For example, coming to the similarities in the Quad and the Indo-Pacific, first of all discuss the fact that is involved in this are all Quad members are the major states in the Indo-Pacific. That means in the Indo-Pacific regions, all Quad members, for example, India, US, Japan and America, these are the major states in the Indo-Pacific region. Both the Quad and Indo-Pacific constructs focused on China. Both the Indo-Pacific తర్వాత క్వాడ్ అనే ఈ 2 గ్రూపులు కూడా చైనా పైన ఫోకస్ చేస్తూనే ఫామ్ అయ్యే దాంట్లో ఒక సిమిలారిటీ కనబడుతుంది. Geographical locations and its policies, so they are also in some ways centered around. కాబట్టి మోస్ట్లీ ఇవి ఎక్కువగా చూసుకున్నట్టయితే ఇండియాస్ జాగ్రఫికల్ లొకేషన్ అండ్ ఇండియాస్ పాలసీస్ వైపు సెంటర్గా రొటేట్ అవుతూ తిరుగుతుంటాయి ఈ క్వాడ్ అనే సిమిలారిటీ అనేది చెప్తున్నాడు. నెక్స్ట్ డిఫరెంట్లీ ఎలా చూడొచ్చు అంటే చైనాని ఒక ఇంకో పర్స్పెక్టివ్లో ఇండో పసిఫిక్ క్వాడ్ని డిఫరెంట్గా చూడాలా అనుకుంటే చైనాని బయట తీసేస్తాం. ఇండో పసిఫిక్ లో క్వాడ్ ని డిఫరెంట్ గా చూడాలనుకుంటే చైనా ఇస్ ఎ నాట్ థ్రెట్. లెట్స్ అజ్యూమ్ చైనా ఇస్ ఎ నాట్ థ్రెట్ హియర్ అండ్ కమింగ్ అవుట్ ఫ్రమ్ ద చైనీస్ ఈక్వేషన్ అండ్ వుడ్ హ్యావ్ ఎ లిటిల్ రేషనల్ ఫర్ ద ఎగ్జిస్టెన్స్. దెర్ ఈస్ నో existence of this Indo-Pacific group accepting the China's strategy. And if you want to see, take India out of the picture. Let's assume take India out of this picture and there is a little sustainability to its ability to sustain a geopolitical constructs, and it will drastically diminish. That means ఇండియాని ఎప్పుడైతే నువ్వు తీసేస్తావో the major political player in the Indo-Pacific region will be out in this perspective. That means the total geopolitical aspects are coming out. That's why we are seeing it is the more of the similarity perspective in the Indo-Pacific and the Quad region. And when we see separately the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, there is no relevance for this. At the same time, Indo-Pacific and Quad are quite different from each other. Ella quite different ante the first is politico economic vision, ఇంతకు ముందు డిస్కస్ చేసాం. సెకండ్ వచ్చి military strategic vision. That is the only basic difference involved in this. Whereas Quad is this is not important. While the Indo-Pacific provides a complex political, Indo-Pacific provides complex political and economic picture with a hesitant but growing articulation of the China and strategic challenge of the China. Quad is inherently more anti-China in character and intent. While the political economic perspective, while we see Indo-Pacific as a political economic perspective with a hesitant but growing articulation and growing opposition of the China, in this perspective, the Quad has gained more relevance and more characterized of anti-China policy of the Quad is intentionalized here. And Indo-Pacific, despite the subtle of anti-China undertones, will find it impossible to avoid engaging China. Despite the subtle undertones, will find impossible to avoid engaging China. Even the Quad, still in its institutional infancy, that means when the origin of the Quad mostly focused on the diplomatic signalings, only diplomatic signalings, not as the military perspective, with little common intent, let alone join the joint action against the China. But it becomes a failure, and now it arises as a strategic and the military perspective. At the moment, it seems paradoxically, however, Quad's ability to succeed entirely dependent on China and more aggressive. When the China gets more aggressive, more resolute the Quad countries strengthening in it. That means చైనా అనేది ఎంత అగ్రెసివ్గా మారుతుందో క్వాడ్ అనేది అంత స్ట్రెంగ్త్ అవుతూ అంత స్ట్రాటజిక్గా ఎవాల్వ్ అవుతుంది గ్రూప్ అని చెప్తున్నాడు అనమాట. హిస్టరీ ఈజ్ టూ ఎర్లీ సే దట్ Indo-Pacific as an economic construct will be able to face an alternative for the China's Belt and Road Initiative. చైనా చూసుకున్నట్టయితే దాని యొక్క బెల్ట్ అండ్ రోడ్ ఇనిషియేటివ్ ద్వారా ఎకనామిక్ కన్స్ట్రక్ట్ అనేది ఒక డెవలప్ చేస్తుంది రీజనలిజంలో. స్ట్రింగ్ ఆఫ్ పల్స్ పాలసీ ద్వారా లోన్స్ ఇచ్చి కంట్రీస్ని డెప్ట్ ట్రాప్ చేసి చుట్టూ ఉన్న ఒక స్ట్రింగ్ ఆఫ్ పల్స్ లాగా ఫామ్ చేసుకొని స్ట్రాటజిక్ లొకేషన్స్లో బెల్ట్ అండ్ రోడ్ ఇనిషియేటివ్ను ఫామ్ చేసి దాని యొక్క ట్రేడ్ని ఇంప్రూవ్ చేసుకోవాలనుకుంటుంది. ఈ పర్స్పెక్టివ్లో ఇండో-పసిఫిక్ గ్రూప్ చూసుకున్నట్టయితే మనము ఎకనామిక్ కన్స్ట్రక్ట్ గా ఇండో-పసిఫిక్ గ్రూప్ అనేది ఎదుగుతుంది వితౌట్ చైనాస్ ఇన్వాల్వ్మెంట్ అనేది ఎర్లీ స్టేట్మెంట్. దట్ మీన్స్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఇన్ ద బడ్డింగ్ స్టేట్ ఓన్లీ, బట్ చైనా ఈస్ వెరీ ర్యాపిడ్లీ గ్రోయింగ్. ద BRI ఈస్ ఫార్ మోస్ట్ అడ్వాన్స్డ్, more thought out, and the economic might of the China state is behind it. The economic might of the Chinese state is behind in this BRI perspective. What is the major aim of the BRI perspective in this is the economic growing of the China. Several Indo-Pacific countries are already members of the BRI. Several Indo-Pacific members are already members of the Belt and Road Initiative. For example, Myanmar, Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, all these countries are the part of the BRI. And coming to Pakistan, and coming to the flip side, the BRI is a Chinese project which already has a immense stress and inherent weak, from its inherent weaknesses such as China's unilateral pursuit of the BRI and associated economic burdens of the state. That means the BRI is a already immense project state under immense stress, such as by using the Chinese unilateral policies of the BRI, it puts economic burdens on the states, giving bad and debt trap, creating the bad debt trap surrounding the states which are surrounding the China. That it is rapidly growing this BRI scheme. And hurdles in India's strategy means notwithstanding the current excitement in New Delhi about the Indo-Pacific. What the question we found, how successful New Delhi's Indo-Pacific strategy would be going forward. ఒక ఎక్సైట్మెంట్తో కాకుండా ఇండో పసిఫిక్ రీజన్ అనేది గ్రో అవుతుంది క్వాడ్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్లో అని కాకుండా మనం చూసినట్టయితే వాట్ ఈస్ ద రియాలిటీ, వాట్ ఈస్ ద రిలవెన్స్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ ఇన్ దిస్, హౌ ద అవర్ ఇండో పసిఫిక్ స్ట్రాటజీ వుడ్ బి రిలవెంట్ టు అవర్ కంట్రీ అండ్ హౌ ఇట్ గో ఫార్వర్డ్ means here the main intention of the author is apart from the strategic and military conventional way, he wants to tell that there is the economic construct who which opposes the Indo-Pacific matters from the Chinese side. That means China will have more, China will develop, China has more developed in the economic perspective than other Indo-Pacific regions. It influences by the economic perspective. For a political construct, Indo-Pacific has to survive. It must be strong in economic partnerships and linkages and the free trade agreements involved in this. Merely focusing on strategy, not only merely focusing on the strategic talk and possible military cooperations will not work always, because at some point the military strategy will be unavoidable by the economic logic will kick in. For example, when you establish a military and strategic vision in a country which is adjoining the China, this economic and military and strategic location of that country will be influenced by the economic logic of the China, and there is more influence of the China, then the military and the strategic plan will fail. That's why he tell that economic logic here also work. With that in mind, let us examine India's economic engagement in the Indo-Pacific. What is the India's economic engagement in the Indo-Pacific region? Let's see. New Delhi's recent decision coming out of the RCEP, which is a flagship free trade agreement of the region, it would potentially complicate the country's future engagement with the region. That means RCEP ఒక ఫ్లాగ్షిప్ రీజన్ యొక్క ఫ్లాగ్షిప్ ఫ్రీ ట్రేడ్ అగ్రిమెంట్ గా ఎవాల్వ్ అవుతున్న టైంలో ఇండియా బయటకు వచ్చేయడం అనేది రీజన్ తో, ఇండో పసిఫిక్ రీజన్ తో ఎంగేజ్మెంట్ అనేది ఒక కాంప్లికేట్ ప్రాసెస్ గా మారిపోయింది అంటున్నారు. బట్ నాట్ ద కంప్లీట్ స్టోరీ హియర్ ఈస్ దిస్. నాట్ what is the real reason behind it is the domestic political compulsion involved in this, which is the backdrop of the RCEP coming out of the India and China's trade. One of the huge gap in the trade between the India and China. That means India sells to the China less and China sells to the India more. That means trade gap is involved in this, and we are losing by the dumping of the Chinese goods into the India. And that exists between the India and Chinese are the, for example, let's see major Indo-Pacific and Quad states. What is the performance of the going trade gap between India and China and other major determining factors in shaping region strategic realities? Our decision not to sign the RCEP needs to be viewed in a broader context of the Chinese institutional engagement of the region. Of the main countries of the Indo-Pacific, the bilateral free trade agreement are as follows. What are the bilateral free trade agreements which India is having with the Indo-Pacific region are FTAs with the India has FTA with the Australia, New Zealand, and the USA, Bangladesh, and Maldives. That's all. Sorry, these are the countries which are not having FTAs with the India in the Indo-Pacific region. What are the countries having the FTAs with the India are South Korea and Asian nations, total Asian nations, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the Japan and the Sri Lanka. These are the countries which India has FTAs. South Korea, Asian, Japan, and Sri Lanka. And China has FTAs with all of these except US and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, the negotiations are going on in Sri Lanka for this FTA. And China is having more free trade agreements with the region. That's why there is the relevance of the in this perspective. And also trilateral free trade agreement negotiations are also going on between the China, Japan, and the South Korea in perspective of China. In such a situation, the economic compulsions made the long way of the shaping of the strategic realities. The strategy of a country will be influenced by the economic compulsion of that country. In this regard, China is crucial for these economies of those states. Even they are contempt economic decoupling from the China, there would be a long process pursued for adequate alternatives to be created for the political determination in the region in the Indo strategy. That's why China, without China, these countries would not have come apart of the economic perspective. And the lesson straightforward here is only the economic realities. Only economic realities can take along the strategy forward. And China's larger military reach, coming to this, economic engagement with reason are insufficient. Not only economic engagements are sufficient, with at least partly due to domestic political considerations, our strategic military engagement in the region are also shortfall. Our strategy and military engagement in this are shortfall when compared to the China. So China is a major defense supplier for in the region countries such as Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand. With all these countries, China will be a major, China is exporting majorly the defense suppliers, and India does not act as a major supplier, defense supplier for these countries. India is only in the dwarf stage of supplying in the minimal sales and defense dialogues and occasional joint military exercises. That's only India performs. And coming to this, coming to the next things, what economic role is the key. The author says economic role is the key in this perspective. Put differently, India's role in the Indo-Pacific will remain limited if it does not prove a major economic partner to these states. That means Indo-Pacific లో ఇండియా అనేది మేజర్ ఎకనామిక్ పార్ట్నర్గా అవ్వకపోతే మాత్రము ఇండియా జస్ట్ ఇండో పసిఫిక్లో ఒక లిమిటెడ్ పవర్గానే ఉండిపోతుంది. ఇట్ డస్ నాట్ బి ఏ స్ట్రాటజిక్ అండ్ ఏ మోర్ పవర్. But given in the economic slowdown, it is impossible to rise in this situation. Lack of the political consensus in the country and failure of the RCEP and India's ability to engage in this situation economically is one of the limitation involved in this. On the military strategic ties, India performance is reason is less than desirable. That means there have to be improvement in the military and the strategy of this location. The only choice then appears is uh, only choice we left with this in this situation is a loosely structured regional strategic alliance with the US and the allies of the US in a broader in the Pacific Indo-Pacific region. This is the only option we left with. But let us clear that there is a fundamental difference between the sustainably engagement of the Indo-Pacific region using economic strategy, military roles, choosing the easier and quicker path of the military alliance with the US and its allies. ఏమంటే ఫండమెంటల్ డిఫరెన్స్ అనేది ఉంది ఏ పర్స్పెక్టివ్లో. జస్ట్ మనకు ఇప్పుడు మనం చూసుకున్నది జస్ట్ ఓన్లీ క్విక్ పాత్, దట్ ఈస్ మిలిటరీ అలయన్స్ విత్ ద యుఎస్ అండ్ ఇట్స్ అలీస్. దీనికి తర్వాత సస్టైనబుల్ ఎంగేజ్మెంట్ అండ్ ది ఇండో పసిఫిక్ రీజన్ ఇన్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్స్ ఆఫ్ ఎకనామిక్ స్ట్రాటజీ మిలిటరీ టూల్స్, ఆల్ దిస్ కంబైనింగ్ ఎకనామిక్ పరంగా స్ట్రాటజీ పరంగా మూడు, మిలిటరీ పరంగా మూడు పరంగా ఒక వ్యూహ రచన అనేది ఒక పర్స్పెక్టివ్. ఓన్లీ యుఎస్ ను ఫాలో అవుతూ యుఎస్ తో మిలిటరీ అలయన్స్ ఫామ్ చేసుకునేది ఇంకో వ్యూహ రచన. ఈ రెండిటికి చాలా పెద్ద డిఫరెన్స్ ఉంది. దట్స్ వై ఇండియా హ్యాస్ టు డెవలప్ ఏ మేజర్ ఎకనామిక్ పవర్ అని అతను చెప్తుంది. మోర్ ఎవర్ ద సఫిషియంట్ పొలిటికల్ కన్సెన్సస్ ఇన్ ద కంట్రీ స్ట్రాటజీ అలయన్స్ టు పర్సూ ద పాత్ హ్యావింగ్ బీన్ సోషలైజ్డ్ ఇన్ ద కోల్డ్ వార్ క్రూషిబుల్ ఆఫ్ నాన్ అలైన్మెంట్. ఇండియా అనేది ఒక నాన్ అలైన్ కంట్రీగానే ఉంది, సోషలైజ్డ్ గా ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ అయ్యి ఆ టైం నుంచి లేటర్ స్ట్రాటజిక్ అటానమీ అనేది అటైన్ చేసుకునేది ఇండియా అన్నమాట. ఇండియా స్ట్రాటజిక్ ఎలైట్ ready embrace new set of beliefs, ideas, balancing acts in the international politics. How far this it will be correct, and in this perspective new set of beliefs how far it will work, and for sure there is a unapologetic realist turn in India's foreign policy today. A broader perspective of the turn of the India's foreign policy we appear today in this way, which is an unavoidable one, which will not be avoidable one, and there is a need. That's why we have to align a side of the in the strategic autonomy means based on our need. We have to align for a country. That is the new belief of the strategic independency. And India debates on balancing and alliances formally undergoing major challenge as well in the India's ideology. New Delhi, however, remains catch between a deeply constrained, unavoidable need to rethink in strategic posture and recognition of material ability to do so, at least now. This all about the article. Coming to the, let's see a look at this map. The trade, what is the trade we are having with our neighbors, and what are the China has having. For example, let's see Australia. We are having in the Indo-Pacific, the major partner in the trade of our is USA, that is $87.96 billion. That means nearly $88 billion of trade between US and India. And the second most bigger partner is total of the Asian nations, that is $96.8 billion. And the third is Australia, that is $30 billion. That means seeing it as a single country, the Australia is the second largest partner in trade of India. And where group of countries, the Asian is the biggest second partner, and biggest first partner as a group of countries. When coming to the individual countries, US is the first country, and Australia is the second country having biggest partner of India, and the least is Maldives, that is $288.9 million, only million dollars. And Sri Lanka having nearly $4 billion, Japan $17 billion, which is the fourth largest trading partner of India. Sorry, South Korea is the fourth largest, that is $20.7 billion, and fifth is the Japan. The first is US, second Australia, third is the South, third is the South Korea, fourth is the Japan, and next is the Sri Lanka, then New Zealand, then Bangladesh. All these are the countries. For example, comparing with the China numbers, at least for example, compare with the Asian nations. In Asian nations, India having $96.8 billion. Let's assume it a $100 billion India is having with the Asian trade. And China is having $600 billion. That means almost a 1/6 of the, only 6 times is bigger than. That means, yeah, in trade and the economic perspective, China is 6 times far before the our country in the trade in the region. This is the what we lack. That means it is having $737 billion with the US. That means we are only having 87.96 billions. In this 7 times bigger than India's trade with the US. China is having. All this is one of the map of the trade. This is the information from the government trade portals and media reports. Association of the Southeast Asians. This is the Asian nations. And this is the bilateral annual trade between India and the China and the major Indo-Pacific regions. This is the figure of 2018 to 19 range. This all about the article regarding the Indo-Asian perspective.